Hello everyone, welcome back to Weaving Web3. We're live at ETH Warsaw and I'm here with Mark, the project lead of Bancor. So what is Bancor and why should we be so excited about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, so Bancor was the first project in DeFi. And so it created this concept called the automatic market maker, or AMM for short. And so it was first to market with that technology. But Bancor, prior to sort of its blockchain and DeFi influence, was also experimenting with social currencies. So there was a social currency that was called Hearts that was meant to alleviate, some of the exposure that some communities would take to their local currencies if there was like a hyperinflation sort of environment, things like that. This was like a very, very successful experiment in how to, let's say, buttress local economies with alternative currencies. And at the time, our chief economist was a gentleman named Bernard Lieta, who was the person who was mostly responsible for the design of the euro currency.
Okay.
So like our roots are really, really deep in, financial sort of structures. And yeah, when Ethereum was launched, we saw an opportunity there to address a problem that we were having with social currencies, which is that in order to realize an exchange rate, you need a market maker there to quote a price. And so we wanted to do that in a decentralized way, where there was no human component to that. And so the Bancor formula was developed and has since been adopted by almost every, DEX protocol that you would know of, with some exceptions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's crazy to be like that first person to do something, and now the foundations of the crypto space we know it is built upon you. And why did you even decide to pivot into crypto itself? Why are you who you are now? Like, what steps have you taken in order to ensure to be in the market as a leader?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think one of the things that is unique to cryptocurrency, at least as it existed in sort of the 2019 to 2021 period, is that it was extremely meritocratic. It wasn't quite as hype driven. Things like DeFi and what you can do with a smart contract infrastructure was relatively new. And so I think at that time, in order to become successful, all you really had to do was really your homework, right? And be, do things that are useful and creative, and be an active participant in the discussion. So I think the early stages of DAOs were very, very good at finding people who were, out of their own volition, wanting to contribute to things. I think that since then, we have kind of entered into more of a commercial environment, and that's okay. Like, I'm not necessarily critical of that. But at the time where I became a character that people could rally behind, it was much less commercialized than it is today. And so I think today it's much more sort of like an influencer atmosphere and that sort of thing. So I don't think there's any real recipe for success. But the one that the way that I achieved success was, study the math, study the contracts, learn some computer science and some programming, and pay attention to, what needs to be done, and try and operate at the fringe of what people are doing and constantly pushing the envelope.
Okay, that's interesting. So where would you want to see Bancor being in the future? Like a hackathon like we are today, what would you like to see maybe people watching this right now building or utilizing? How could they be integrated? And how, as let's say myself as a front-end user or an institution, what is the plan or the idea for you?
Sure. So I like to think of us as providing the rails, right? The base layer. The business has changed a lot since I took leadership. I really want to be an infrastructure provider. Things like being responsible for rallying communities and end users and developing UIs and things like that. I think we're much better as the scientists and engineers behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And that there are organizations that are sort of better at jazzing it up and deciding how the product should be presented. And so with that perspective, what I would like to do is to create the most generic, the most flexible version of these smart contracts.
Okay.
And then basically license it out to people that want to build a product framework around it. And so long as we keep the the underlying engine well operating and appropriately audited and so
Absolutely.
on, then there's all kinds of things that you can do with that engine. Like some people might take that and say, I want to build a Porsche-like brand out of this thing, or some people would be like, I want to build, a small town suburban car, sort of, and that kind of marketing aspect is something that I would much rather leave to people that are more marketing oriented. And so, I see us as being sort of moving a little bit more into the background, but also becoming a little bit more pervasive in our influence, in the sense that the technology is going to be more adopted and much closer to to our sphere of influence.
Yeah, absolutely. I do definitely really agree with you. I think our space has become like quite cluttered, and everyone's been building, like, let's say, niche, super hyper complex, I'm going to use a metaphor, like supercars, no one can actually afford using that infrastructure, because if they try to build it, it's so expensive and stuff. But actually, we need to have like that base layer back to basics. Like you were the first ones to create the formula. Now we're going back into the basic infrastructure that anyone can utilize. Because look, at the end of the day, we all want to succeed, and if we make it as easy as possible for users, developers, we will be successful in that space, right?
Yeah, I think that like one of the things that I'm sure you've observed as well is this like forking culture.
Yes.
Right? And it's interesting because the people that that create and maintain these forks, there are two sort of camps. There are the guys that fork something but then know that it has issues. So for example, Andre Cronje's Solidly DEX infrastructure had some like very systemic issues like built into the code when it was first released. And then you've got teams like Aerodrome that when they forked it, they didn't just fork it, they like remade it, right? And fixed it all and got it operating correctly.
Actual innovation. Because that's the thing that always annoys. They fork a protocol. They do nothing. They literally just leave it there, and then there's all these issues like you said. But that is the key driving thing. And that's why they've got that TVL on base, and they're beating all the big players right now. Because
and they have a credible claim to ownership over the things that they've done. And then there are other teams that don't have the resources, because like auditing is an expensive process, and software engineers are an expensive hire, and they might not necessarily have those resources yet, but they know that there's a market niche that's unoccupied or something, and they're like, you know what, let's just fork a thing, and what we excel at is front end design or something like that. And when you speak with these teams, you can tell that there's kind of a reluctance. Like they know that they've taken something that didn't belong to them and have like put a new skin over it, and they've been a little bit uncomfortable about that. And so what we're trying to take is like a more like fork positive approach. It's like we want to be forked, but it's a business arrangement.
Yeah.
And this means that there's an open channel of communication. So if they need engineering advice on how to, make the product more customizable or something, for their use case, or if they run into a problem that they're not prepared to deal with, they can come back to the people that originally wrote it and get the best possible quality of advice on how to move forward. So I think that recognizing that there is a legitimacy to this kind of forking mentality is positive. And, you can cater to that, and that can be a very productive way to do business.
That's really smart. I totally agree with you as well. Like, I guess you've done all the auditing on the contracts and stuff like that, so those teams don't have to worry as much on that end, which is, I think, really important.
Auditing became like a very significant problem in 2021, where because of this onrush of new protocols, the wait time to actually get your code, before an auditor was like 9 months or more, and the asking prices were skyrocketing. And so because people didn't want to wait and they wanted to be fast to market, or they couldn't afford the asking price, it became commonplace to just not audit code anymore. And that's bad.
Yeah.
And so there is an efficiency that you get, an auditing efficiency, from being the people that say, look, we will write the code and maintain it and audit it. and you just license it from us. And this means that you no longer are in this situation where you're constantly overwhelming auditors
for sure.
with code. And it also means that we can establish long-term relationships with the auditor who gets used to the code base.
Okay.
And so it's even a more secure way to remain active in this space.
Okay, you're literally planning out the entire steps just to ensure there is that, let's say, the repeatability and knowingness of the code. As someone who potentially is watching someone, a user at an institution, what do you want them to know about you that would be vital for them to maybe make that step forward? Or what kind of people would you like to attract?
Yeah, so it's the people that I really like working with are the entrepreneurs, right, that want to or have a very specific business plan for their product. Usually it will be something like a brand identity or a community that they know that they can activate, something like that, but don't necessarily can consider themselves an engineer or an inventor, right? And those are the people that I really like working with, right? The people that would much rather take something that's already worked out and apply it.
Yeah.
Right? They're the people that I really like working with. At the same time, I do enjoy conversations with people that are inventing something from the ground up. But from a business perspective, it's usually like we have a professional courtesy to each other and we enjoy speaking with each other. But generally our Venn diagrams don't really touch.
Yeah.
It's the people that want to take something to market in a profound way. They're the people that I want to support.
Okay, interesting. So is there anything that you're excited that is currently being built or is slightly lacking that you would like to be seen?
Well, yeah, I mean, everything that I'm the most excited about and that I want to address the most is exactly the things that I work on. I said that Bancor invented the AMM, but the AMM is also like not a very good financial instrument. It was conceived of as a way to bootstrap liquidity and create a price discovery mechanism and allow for people to trade with each other without not having to know each other, for example. The idea back then was that if you're issuing the token, you create the liquidity pool, right? That's your responsibility. During DeFi summer, the industry started to experiment with this idea of actually, what if it's the community's problem? Like, what if we make it their problem to keep these things liquid? And we invented things like liquidity mining rewards and these other things. And it did well for a time, but I think even back then, people knew that this is unsustainable and it's headed for disaster. I think we're kind of still in the hangover of that right now. And so with the products that I'm building now, it's like, okay, like what is it about an AMM that doesn't represent the agency of the user or doesn't represent their specific view of a developing market or something like that. And because it's unusually prescriptive the way that these decentralized exchanges operate. High level, it's basically the protocol says this is a very specific trading strategy and you either subscribe to it or you don't. That's it. And I think that at the time, because of the simplicity of it, and it's like literally just stake your tokens here, that kind of thing, and we can feed nonsense about like fees and other things to try and attract users, plus liquidity mining and that kind of thing. But the actual model itself is not very generalizable in like a retail sense or like a human sense. If you're a token issuer, sure. I mean, because your tokens, when you generated them, weren't worth anything, so it doesn't really matter what the AMM does with them. But if you've bought the tokens yourself and that you're trying to trade them or make markets with them, then how do we capture the user's intentions without, the protocol imposing too many limitations on them? And even with things like concentrated liquidity, which introduced a little bit more flexibility with respect to which price ranges and things could be supported, still prescriptive because of the symmetric nature of it. And some implementations, the most common one has like tick constraints that limit prices and things like that. So with the development of what we call carbon DeFi, which is an anagram of Bancor, it has no tick constraints. It has the symmetry of the position is not a requirement, so you can trade exclusively in one direction and quote prices and things like that. And so that kind of agency is, I think, what has been mostly lacking from the industry. And I don't want to say it has held it back, because it might have actually pushed it along a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that we're paying for it. But, you know, we've gained ground that we didn't deserve.
Yeah. Oh, no, I absolutely agree.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm trying to roll it back more to first principles and make things feel and look a lot more what I would consider to be a healthy, normal, functioning marketplace to look like.
Ah. So what I understand from you today is saying there's a really exciting new vision coming for Bancor, right? A new direction, a new setting, and especially like we are in, I guess, crypto has become so, let's say, more popularized now. We are getting that interest and the new kinds of, let's say, developers and people being like, okay, this is actually a future we can actually build upon, right? If there's anything that maybe I haven't asked yet, you think that you really need to get across to people?
Oh, yeah. Just, I think that DeFi isn't done, you know? Like, it can be easy to convince yourself when you look at the lay of the industry right now, that the technologies that were invented in literally 2017 are still the ones that are predominating today. And this, again, is coming back to that forking culture and things that we spoke about earlier in the interview. But projects like ours, projects like Euler, you know, projects like Curve, have continued to do like relatively new things.
Yes.
Like the envelope does keep getting pushed. Sometimes it doesn't make it into, you know, the YouTube highlights reels or something, because the influencers generally don't.
They have no idea.
They don't really care. You know, they don't. I don't think that they spend much time examining the technology and trying to understand it. I think they're much more interested in, you know, things like making money and tokenomics and like stuff that brings in like the widest possible demographic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that can obfuscate the fact that actually progress has never slowed down. And if you dig around and have a look into it, like if you start having a look at, for example, the papers that are released in Archive and things like that, you will realize that actually that golden age of DeFi never really stopped.
Yeah.
And like, if nothing else, you know, take solace in that fact.
Okay, wow, that's really inspiring. I really I have learned so much today, and I appreciate you coming on to it. If you have like a closing statement that you would like to give up to the public, I offer you the chance now. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to say thank you so much.
I think that we've covered everything. So
Okay,
no closing statement.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was Weaving Web3 at ETH Warsaw and with the lead of Bancor. Thank you.